All right, party people, it is time to talk about something I know you guys have wanted me to talk about because people have DM'd me and talked to me in person about it. We're going to be talking about Wyrmspan versus Finspan versus Wingspan. I only have these two copies right now. I'm not going to get the nesting box. It's way too big. But let's talk about which one is best and which one might be best for you and should you add it to your collection. Now, starting off, all three of them are good games. Objectively speaking, they're good games. There's no reason you can say, like, well, objectively, this game sucks. That's not true. No. I don't believe in that in general. I believe almost every game is subjectively good. Objectivity is very, very difficult to come by with things like quality of games. But all three of these, I would say, objectively speaking, based on popularity, the content, there's not too much to dislike about these games at all. But let's go ahead and start with the background of all three games. Step one, we have Wingspan. Now, Wingspan is a very interesting game because it is the beginning of the trilogy. It went Wingspan, then it went Wyrmspan. Now it's recently released. It is Finspan. Wingspan came out like 2019, something like that. It was incredibly popular. No one can find a copy of it. One of the main things that stuck about Wingspan was the art itself. That art stuck out so beautifully. Stonemaier did a great job pushing it and combining the theme with the mechanics, with the bird feeder, and the different things that come down, minor player interactions with the resource generation. And additionally, it gave a much-needed component to it, which was the first step guide. That first step guide, for people who don't play board games too much, they're very, very attracted to Wingspan because of the theme and, again, the looks to it. It looked good, and it was a deceptively more complicated game. But nothing crazy or anything like that. But for people like me who are just getting to board games and needed something to understand how to play that game particularly, the First Steps Guide very much assisted my journey, at least. So that was Wingspan. Now going to Wyrmspan. Now this game took a surprising turn with the complexity of it. This game is definitely the heaviest of the three by far. Wyrmspan has the guild board, which added a lot of replayability to it. There's about 3 or 4 different guild boards, each with their own distinct, unique attributes to it. Some give you coins, some give you resources, cards, cave cards. In Wingspan, it was rare for you to ever fill up your board. Actually, it was near impossible for you to ever fill up your board if you're playing properly. Wyrmspan, very, very feasible for you to actually fill up the entire board, utilizing the extra actions given through the variable length of rounds because of your how many coins you had, how many coins you chose to use in that round. So Wyrmspan actually gave a lot of complexity that Wingspan did not have. And still, no take that elements in any of these three games. I want that known right now. If you're afraid of take that, it's not there at all. It's very, very friendly. The closest thing is with objective scoring. In Wingspan, you had the friendly side for the between round totals, which if you choose the harder or the more mean mode, if you have more than other people, you get more points. But if you chose the friendly side, as long as you have like 4, you'll all score the most amount of points if you all have 4 type stuff. Wyrmspan was not like that. The guild board definitely was a little bit more brutal. Just because if you wanted, like, let's say you wanted an extra coin, and that's where you're going to go on the guild board. If someone else went up faster than you, they would take that spot instead of you, which is very, very important to know. So that is the main thing about Wyrmspan. It is definitely a more complex game, not for your average intro board gamer. Definitely try out Wingspan before you try out this game. If Wingspan's too hard for you, do not touch Wyrmspan. That was my strong suggestion. But going into the background of Finspan, this game is definitely the most controversial of them all. I myself also thought it was a meme whenever I first saw it, but that's mainly because when Wyrmspan was announced, the amount of people who announced other meme-like versions of Wingspan, there's like board game span, there was span, there was video span. There's all these different variations of what span games could be. Not as a mockery, more of as a humorous, how many more of these are we going to get? So when Finspan was announced, me or myself and a lot of other people thought it was another joke or something like that. But it was a real thing. I definitely had to do a triple take to confirm this was a real game. And people thought, they accused Stonemaier of just milking money, milking the machine. But as long as the game's quality, it doesn't really matter what the theme is, doesn't matter where it comes from, as long as the game is quality and honors the consumer as much as they deserve, respectively. And that's exactly what this game did. It is an intro version for the trilogy. Definitely go ahead and check this game out. This one has it around you. If you think Wingspan's too simple, this is definitely even more simple. In Wingspan, you have like 4 or 5 different resources, including the eggs, sometimes the cards, if you include that. This game has 3 resources max. It's the cards, the eggs, and the fish that you hatch from the eggs. But because of simplicity, you're able to actually enjoy your time and your community and conversation you have at the table a lot more. You can engage with the art. It's super friendly. Your income stage is a lot more simple. It's really like, if you have a fish here, get this. If you have a fish here, get that. Have you done this before? If not, get this. It's all very, very nice. You see a lot more of the cards that you see in all the Span games of, if you lay eggs, everyone gets to lay an egg. If you get 2 cards, everyone gets a card type stuff. This is the friendliest, the nicest version. There's no competitive round scoring. It's all like, hey, for every school of fish you have, everyone gets 2 points for each school of fish. For each blank you have, everyone gets this. So it's very friendly. The main issue with this game we'll talk about later. But that's the background of all 3 Span games. Now let's talk about the pros to all 3 Span games. Wingspan has a nice, fun interaction with the board and each player. Indirect, but still, it's never really harmful to each other. It's more so like, well, I needed worms. If you also needed worms, I'm sorry, but I need worms. More like prioritizing yourself and not really needing to compromise for other people. The game really allows you to re-roll the stuff in there a lot. The main topic of conversation was the lack of resources to begin with and the lack of guaranteed income in Wingspan. Wyrmspan did a much better job, and this is where we're going to transition to the pros of Wyrmspan, of guaranteeing resources that you want. It's really, whenever you gain resources in that game, almost always do you get to choose what it is. And if not, there's a really simple conversion to it. So if you need black crystal, go ahead and take the resource action. You can probably get black crystal. If you need milk, same thing, you can get milk. If you need eggs, that's a different thing, but you can still go ahead to the 3rd line and get eggs. Everything allows you to get exactly what you need as long as you build towards it. Wingspan, not so much. It was more so manipulating the bird feeder by taking some food, re-rolling it, taking some food, re-rolling it, and that kind of strat. But nothing was as guaranteed. And Wyrmspan, again, added much-needed depth for certain players. I know myself, I tend to play every game out there, but I prefer some of the heavier, mid to heavy games. That's exactly what this came from. Wingspan felt about a little bit restricted or limiting, which we'll talk about more in the con section. But this game was a lot more open-ended, a lot more structured, and a little bit more organized for my taste. Finspan, one of the main pros for Finspan is how straightforward the enjoyment is. You really do not have to think about, like, oh, did I miss this, did I miss that? The game's straightforward, it's easy to teach, easy to play, not a long commitment. You finally have like a Span game that you can play as a filler version. Wingspan always took a minimum like 90 minutes. If you play 3 players, no matter how fast you guys are, it was really a 90-minute game. Wyrmspan is more like a 90-minute to 2-hour experience because of all the complexities and all the things you have to consider, and you don't want to really rush your turn because this game is a lot more competitive in nature where you want to like definitely take over victory for. Finspan is a lot more relaxed of a game. You can genuinely play this 2 players in like 20, 25 minutes. It's simple, it's quick, it's efficient, and with the upgraded components, it is a super cool board presence with the wooden fish and with the rubber little gummy eggs you have for fish, which I think does a great job in that game. So the cons for these 3 games, and this is where I hate talking negatively about board games, but I do want to address that there are some cons for these things as a blank versus blank list should have. And Wingspan, as I said, it's very player dependent. The game definitely determines, it's based on what players are doing what. So in Wingspan, it very much determined if you guys all happen to go for resources like you all need rats at the table. Rats are hard to find in Wingspan. So if people are going for rats, you can have a much more difficult game because you could finally take your turn, re-roll the dice, finally get rats, but you can't consume anymore. Someone else takes your rats. And that was a bit frustrating because the income was not as guaranteed as it maybe should be for a game that is all about the resources and playing cards, stuff like that. In Wyrmspan, it is not UI friendly, I'll say that much. The boards were not as intuitive to understand or as clean as maybe they could have been. In Wingspan, that was not the case. Very intuitive board, mostly symbology, very easy to understand and see what's going on. Wyrmspan was a little bit cluttered, so it's not as visually appealing. I consistently forgot to put my coins in certain areas. I wish there was like a section for that, which they fixed in Finspan for the record. There's a slot to put your workers 100%. Your workers take up very specific locations depending on what you do. It tells you where to go and what to hop on for the lines, and that was very nice. And I was like, oh, maybe I should stop there. Oh, wait, the ending line's here. Let me just continue my turn. So in Finspan, they definitely fixed that issue from Wyrmspan specifically. And in Finspan, weirdly enough, I would say Finspan is almost the same level of enjoyment as Wingspan, but because there's not too much to keep track of or maybe to do in that game, you don't really have to think too much. So a lot of your downtime is kind of spent not engaging with the game. Some people have described it as being a little bit more on the boring side. I take that as a attribute because it means it's a really good lower player count experience. Wingspan was always a game that people always, same thing with Wyrmspan. People say, like, I never want to play that in 5 players. That's a 3 to 4 player max kind of game. This game is more of a 3 player max kind of game, just because you don't really want downtime in that game. There's not much you're doing. You really just want your next turn. That's what is good about Finspan. You want to engage really quickly with that turn. And Finspan, or Wyrmspan and in Wingspan, you're planning your turn in between turns. It depends on what you pick up. Depends on this and that. But with Finspan, because when you discard a card that stays in your personal discard pile, you're actually able to understand your next steps a lot more effectively and efficiently. So you definitely want to quickly do your turn faster and faster, like, oh, just let me do my thing, which is why I would say it thrives in a 2-player environment, especially because the boards take up more of a vertical space on your player table. Wingspan and Wyrmspan, as you know, fold out like a Bible or a book of some kind. So you just need your left and right of you, which everyone is used to in board games. But in Finspan, I have a 3-foot table. Both the boards laid out. We actually had to have it staggered a little bit, and it kind of wasn't as clean as table setup as I wish it was. But overall, it was not too distracting of an experience once people understood and got used to it. It was really clear just to pass things around. You had a nice space in the middle between the 4 of us, which was also nice, that we can all grab it, because in games like Wyrmspan, the guild token and the guild tracks are in the middle of the board. Same thing as in Wingspan. You have the resource dice in the middle of the board, but you don't have that all for Finspan, so it's nice having all the resources pool in the middle. So as I said, each game has their own pros, their own cons, and their own backstories, but this is where we're going to talk about which game wins. Now, I'm going to upfront say, personally, I believe Wyrmspan wins, but that is not what you should go by. I'm going to describe a few games and a few traits that you should lean towards and maybe check out, depending on what kind of player you are. So, if you are very new to board gaming, or if you're not even a board gamer at all, but you want to try one of these games out, I 100% suggest Finspan first. This is a game for non-gamers. This is a game for people to understand what board gaming is, understand what the Wingspan journey overall is, and engage with it and determine whether or not they want to take the next step into board gaming. If you're a card gamer, maybe you want to try out a real board game per se, this is a good one for you. It's a nice game, beautiful cards, beautiful table presence, same thing as all the other Span games and Stonemaier games in general. So that is what you should play if you are into Finspan, but maybe stay away from it if your average game is like Dune Imperium. If you really, really enjoy those heavy games with those complex turns and maybe like a really strong chain, stay away from this. This game does not chain that much at all. So the main enjoyment from this game is the fact you have 24 turns, which allows you to do a bunch of different things in the game throughout your turn. You don't really play like multiple cards. You don't really like have, I did this and this and this and this. Some of the best things you do is just resolving all your effects in your little engine, which this has to be one of the fastest engines games you can kind of get into. So this game does a really, really good job of introducing new mechanics to people who may not have experienced it otherwise. Wingspan is a novice board game. So if you want to try something, if you've been playing card games, you've been playing like the lighter end games, you want to take a chance at something that maybe has some more depth, some more strategic options, some more varied gameplay. You can actually go for one row, maybe one type of bird, maybe go for the predators in one game, maybe go for a certain type of resource, maybe play competitively versus cooperatively with the shared goal cards. You should definitely try out Wingspan. That is definitely the more balanced middle end, but still leaning towards the lighter end of all these games. Additionally, I would still say, as a huge lover of dragons, D&D, and all that stuff, I will still say the best theme between all of them definitely has to be Wingspan. Wingspan is the cleanest, is the most organic art. I loved looking at all the effects. It reminded me of my grandpa as well. My grandpa was a bird watcher at the end of his life, and it was nice to see how, like, oh, this bird has like 35 wingspan, and also the predator over here can eat anything under 50 wormspan. And they're all factual, they're all tidbits. It was stuff for us to learn together as a table, especially with the app. That app was unparalleled. If you play Wingspan, if you don't know about, it's called like Wing Song or something like that, where you can scan the card and it makes the calling noise. That made me play Wingspan another 2 or 3 times just to experience those noises. It was really, really cool. I really hope they do something like that for Wyrmspan, but of course we don't have real life dragons to replicate the sounds for, but maybe even a generator for AI or something like that. Or if we could procedurally create some interesting noises and have that done, that would be pretty cool. But Wyrmspan, you should definitely go towards Wyrmspan if you are, don't do it if you're into fantasy, but do it if you're into heavier games with more meaty thoughts with good chains. The best chains in all these games have to be Wyrmspan. The most satisfying experience is Wyrmspan, in my opinion, because you have I think it's a 3x5 board with 3 rows and 5 spots, and in that board you can fully flesh it out. You can have the entire board filled with all these different effects, which was so satisfying. The benefits you can get from the extra turns and having those extra turns to get you more points. The guild tracker, you can fly around and definitely get some extra benefits that way and beat your opponents. This game has to be the most satisfying, balanced, enjoyable game out of the trilogy by far for me, and it has nothing to do with the dragon theme. If this was a fish theme, I couldn't care less, but the difficulty and the entertainment value I've gotten from just looking at the beauty. Honestly, the card art in this game is interesting to me, but I much more prefer the art in Wingspan and Finspan, personally speaking. The dragons are beautiful, but I don't know. It was interesting doing a dragon watching game as opposed to like a dragon slaying game. But with my fantasy themes, I much more prefer something more combat wise. So this would be interesting. But again, to each their own. That's what I would say. So overall, I would say Wyrmspan wins, no questions, hands down. But definitely give the other games a shot if you're into lighter games and maybe you want to try out just some part of gaming culture. Stonemaier Games has done a great job at making these games that are the cornerstone and becoming the cornerstone of board gaming in general. They've sold so many copies. Scythe is a go-to for so many people, especially people who are entering the field. Same thing for, not really so much for Red Rising, but Libertalia is one of the best games I've ever played for 6-player accounts. So definitely, thank you so much for Jamie and everyone behind the Stonemaier Games for creating all the games we do. If you want to play these games and check them out more, come to the Orlando, Florida events we have. We have a convention where we're giving out Finspan as a play-to-win game happening April 26th of 2025. Tickets will be in the description of this video below. I'll be doing a giveaway for Finspan pretty soon on this channel, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe to be part of that. You tell me which of these 3 games is your favorite, and I definitely want to get back to you and hear what all of you say. But in general, peace, have a great day, God bless. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys at the table soon. Bye.